Trump names Russia aggressor in Ukraine war for the first time. China warns it will hit back if NATO countries slap tariffs on Russian oil. And how Europe talks but doesn't act on Russia sanctions. The latest news next. US President Donald Trump has accused Europeans of taking too soft a stance on Russia, saying that they are talking and they are not doing. He has stressed that further US sanctions will depend on whether Europe strengthens its own restrictive measures and stops buying Russian oil, reported by Trump speaking to journalists before boarding the presidential aircraft Air Force One. Responding to a question about possible NATO sanctions against Russia, Trump said that the alliance and Europe are not doing the job. His main criticism was that European countries continue to buy oil from Russia.
Look, Europe, they're my friends, but they're buying oil from Russia. So we can't be expected to be the only ones that are full bore.
He described the sanctions imposed by Europe as not tough enough and set a condition for further action by the US.
I'm willing to do sanctions, but they're going to have to toughen up their sanctions commensurate with what I'm doing.
Clarifying his position, Trump confirmed that he expected synchronized or even preemptive actions from European partners.
Well, I'm ready to move ahead, but they have to. I think they will, but right now they're talking and they're not doing.
He made it clear that the agreement with Europeans was for a complete halt to purchases of Russian goods.
The deal is, whether it's natural gas or whether it's cigarettes, I don't care, they, Europeans, are not supposed to be buying from Russia.
When reminded by journalists about his promise to impose serious sanctions on Russia, Trump insisted that when they are introduced, they will be very, very strong. Trump talks tough, scolds Europe for not doing the job, and promises very, very strong sanctions, yet month after month, it's all words and no action. He blames European allies for buying Russian oil, sets endless conditions, and insists the US can't act alone, all while Putin watches, plans, and profits. The reality is clear. Trump's threats are empty posturing, a show for the cameras, while Europe continues importing Russian energy and Russia keeps fueling its war. This is not leadership, it's performance without consequences. If words were weapons, the Kremlin would already be on its knees. US President Donald Trump for the first time openly called Russia the aggressor in the war against Ukraine, acknowledging its heavier losses, says Politico. On Sunday, the American leader publicly admitted for the first time that Russia is the aggressor in the war against Ukraine. 8,000 soldiers have died this week from both countries, some more from Russia, but when you're the aggressor, you lose more, Trump told reporters, commenting on battlefield losses. Trump's earlier statements. Previously, the US president had refused to directly condemn Moscow. In February, his administration, alongside Russia and North Korea, voted against a UN resolution supporting Ukrainian territorial integrity. Washington also opposed a G7 statement that labeled Russia as the aggressor. In April, Trump even blamed Ukraine for the conflict, saying, "You don't start a war against someone 20 times your size and then hope that people give you some missiles." Shift in position this summer. By summer 2025, Trump's stance on the Kremlin had changed significantly. The US administration ramped up pressure on Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, who had been blocking Trump's attempts to arrange direct talks with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. His latest remarks suggest Washington is now taking a tougher line toward Moscow. China has threatened to take decisive measures in response if NATO countries, under pressure from the US, attempt to impose tariffs on Russian oil purchases, according to Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Liang Jian. Beijing has taken an objective and impartial position since the first day of the war, insisting on the promotion of peace talks, he says.
We firmly oppose certain parties directing the issue at China, and we firmly oppose the imposition of unlawful unilateral sanctions and long-arm jurisdiction on China.
Lin Jian threatened that if the legitimate rights and interests of China are violated, Beijing will take decisive countermeasures and firmly defend its sovereignty, security, and development interests. The administration of US President Donald Trump does not rule out the imposition of secondary sanctions against Russia in the form of 100% tariffs for India, China, and Turkey to force these countries to stop buying Russian oil and persuade Russian dictator Vladimir Putin to end the war with Ukraine. Meanwhile, Trump is in no hurry to impose new restrictions on China, citing the active phase of trade negotiations between the countries. The head of the Russian Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, has made new threats of war with NATO. The head of Ukrainian's presidential office, Andriy Yermak, responded to his words. What Medvedev said: Medvedev threatened that granting NATO countries the right to shoot down Russian drones over Ukraine would lead to war between the alliance and Russia.
The implementation of the provocative idea of Kyiv and others to create a no-fly zone and the possibility for NATO countries to shoot down our UAVs will mean only one thing: war between NATO and Russia. We must call a spade a spade.
Yermak's comment. In response, the head of the office of the President of Ukraine noted that in order for drones not to be shot down, they must not be launched.
The formula is simple and would demonstrate the Russians' desire to end the war. Instead, we see only a desire to attack and avoid responsibility. Ukraine responds to such behavior with strikes on the Russian pain points.
Russian drones over Poland. On September 10th, about 24 Russian strike drones violated Polish airspace from Ukraine and Belarus. Air Defense and Aviation Forces managed to shoot down only 4 of them. One of the drones damaged a residential building in a village in the Lublin voivodeship. Another fell on the territory of a military base but did not detonate. In total, fragments of 16 downed aircraft were found in the eastern border areas with Ukraine. After the UAV attack, Poland appealed to NATO for additional air defense systems and protection against drones. Absolutely shocking. Russian strike drones are violating Polish airspace repeatedly, damaging civilian property, and even landing on military bases, yet only 4 are intercepted. 16 wrecks scattered along the eastern border, and the threat remains active. This is a clear sign of Moscow testing boundaries and NATO's resolve. Poland is on the front line, and the lack of immediate decisive action sends the wrong message. Aggression goes unchecked. Allies cannot keep the dithering with the "we will see" and "we are monitoring" while Russian UAVs fairly breach borders. The time for vague statements has passed. Robust, proactive air defense is non-negotiable, and the Kremlin must understand that crossing lines will have real consequences. Every delay strengthens the aggressor and endangers Europe. That's all for today. Thanks for watching this video. Support Ukraine, like and subscribe.